Okay, question number 1. What changes would you like to make in Grand Lodge? Not necessarily in Masonry, but specifically in our Grand Lodge.
The changes I would like, some of the changes I'd like to see implemented would be in our communications to our brothers from the top down and from the bottom up. I don't believe our communications is a real strong point of our fraternity, and we need to do a better job of it. For example, I just found out not long ago that there was a thing called the 6-Step program that was initiated back at the leadership conference, but yet I never saw anything formally come down from Grand Lodge as to what the 6-Step program was about. That's just one example. Another thing I would like to see is when it comes to retention of our membership, I think we need to do a better job of that, and Grand Lodge can facilitate in doing that by, I think, setting up what I would call a committee or a research to do and check out those lodges that have done a good job of retaining the new members, putting them to work, have a limited number or a decreasing number of non-payment of dues, and so on. I think those two things, communications and focusing on retention and training of our new Masons, would go a long ways, and I think Grand Lodge can do a better job of doing just that.
Thank you. Candidate number 2, same question.
One of the projects that we're working on this year for the annual communication is electronic balloting, which will make that a lot more efficient and a lot more accurate in my view. One of the projects that I have been throwing out there and hoping that I'll get a bite on is to do satellite video conference locations for Grand Lodge, so that, for example, we will have elderly members who don't want to drive or can't drive. There's no reason in the world with today's technology that we can't have satellite locations up, and we can conduct the business of the Grand Lodge over those video conferences. You go to a tiled lodge, only those members who are entitled to vote would be able to ballot. We can do that. It's not hard. And there's been some reluctance to implement that, more out of discomfort because they don't understand the technology, those who are in the decision-making process. But that's changing, and in fact we started to do that this past year on a trial basis, and it looks like that we'll be able to start testing that in the near future. Communications has always been an issue, especially with our migratory population, if you will. We have members now that move every 2 or 3 years. They try to get into new communities, and the membership issue is an ongoing issue that the 6-Step program that Charles was talking about is directed at trying to begin to correct. And it really boils down to how Masons treat each other. And if we observe the obligations that we take, then some of these issues will remediate. They'll get better. But as far as changes in the Grand Lodge, you have to be very careful about what you choose to implement. You don't want to fix one problem and create 2 or 3 others. You have to be very careful.
The primary thing I'd like to look at is the distribution of duties among the elected officers. And the main reason I'm looking at this is I've seen too many of our past Grand Masters when they were in office. By about 3 months in, they are just ragged. They are not out there doing what a typical general or a CEO or somebody in charge of a large organization should be doing. That person at the top should be spending the majority of their time getting inspiration to the troops, getting inspiration to our lodges, being able to be out there and have that kind of interaction. Still, the CEO or the general is obviously the one who is in charge and responsible, as our Grand Master by code is. But instead of having the Grand Master have to be the primary point man on every piece of Masonic business that comes before his desk, I think we should have the other electeds have specific duties which are codified. And I'll give you an example. Right now, if you look at the installation of officers for the Grand Lodge, basically the senior and the junior Grand Warden virtually have nothing stated as to what their duties are. I would propose that, for example, under the administration of the Grand Master and his wishes and his wife's wishes, that the Junior Grand Warden be in charge of the annual communication, just as in our lodges, the Junior Ward is in charge of refreshment. They would be the ones who would set up be in charge of the arrangements committee, deal with the Grand Secretary, deal with some of the contract issues as they come up. The Deputy Grand Master, another example, should be the primary point man on anything that has to do with disciplinary action. The Senior Grand Warden could be in charge of facilities, dealing with temple boards and things like this. The reason that I believe this would be a fundamental change, other than just wearing down one man as he's in that office, is the fact that I think most people who've been past masters in our part of our Grand Lodge think back to the time that they're master, and the year that they got out of being master, they thought, boy, if I only had that to do over, I would have done it differently. If the Grand Master is the one who's overseeing and doing like a CEO, signing off and saying, yeah, that's the right thing, he has the experience of already doing that for 1 year, either as junior, senior, or deputy, and then have that perspective of being the executive and being able to sign off on those. So what it ends up at, our organization ends up being a little less traditionally Masonic, but I believe more effective in the business of Masonry. And one of the things I want to focus on from a Grand Lodge perspective, if we're doing the business of Masonry effectively and correctly, it shouldn't be seen. Good leaders do the business. I hear too much today about the business of Masonry, and I've heard that for a number of years. Who wants to go to a lodge meeting or a regional meeting or a district meeting and hear all about business? You want to hear about what Masonry means to individual Masons and why it's important to us, and I think this change in structure would do that.